Hey guys, welcome to Own Your Happy with Jen. And today I have Melissa McDaniel.
Yes.
Okay, I don't think I've said your last name out loud before. I've just seen it in writing.
Yeah.
She is a best-selling author, a speaker, and an advocate for sexual assault survivors. Did I say that correctly?
You got it correct. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so pumped for this because by 6 degrees, I think we're all touched by this, probably even by 2 degrees, if we're honest. We're all touched by somebody that has been sexually assaulted or themselves or in their family. And this came up in my life again this summer, quite extended, but I was, so happy that I knew you, that I could share somebody it didn't ruin the entire projection of her life. I feel like you've really embraced all of it. Like, it's just beautiful. Like, you wrote a book about it to help other people. Like, you wrote a book, a best-selling book, Melissa.
It happened.
Crazy is that? However, it was released during COVID, and we were just discussing how that's not the funnest time to release a book. You don't get to do all of the fun things like go into the stores and all of that stuff, but it will come in time. I would love to kick off with, how many years ago did this happen for you, so that somebody that is maybe listening, that this is a little bit fresh for them, where are you at in your journey with this, I guess?
Yeah, so it happened to me when I was 20 years old. I was a sophomore in college on a full ride scholarship, loving and living life. And so now do I even want to say my age? I'm 34, almost 35. So it's been quite the journey. I would say in the beginning of this journey, I never saw myself writing a book or being this open and honest and vulnerable about my experience. But the more that time went on and the more that I longed to see myself mirrored in another, I realized that I wasn't quite seeing myself and I needed to step out and be the person that I wanted to see.
And so at what point were you like, okay, I'm going to share this as a book? Or did you just know you wanted to share your story? Like, how did that work for you? Like,
I feel like it was kind of this magical thing that happened. Like most amazing things in my life. I heard these words and it was, if you do not see her, you have to be her. And this was at the beginning of 2018. So when the hashtag Me Too was swirling around and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone, right? Like, look at all these other people. How did I not know I wasn't alone? But then as I started to see the hashtag, it was like, it happened to me at this age in this location. And beyond that, the conversation didn't seem to go much further. And so although I didn't feel alone, I knew it had happened to others, I felt alone in the fact that I was still crying on the kitchen floor and I still was struggling to build meaningful relationships. And so from that, I decided that if I didn't see her, that person openly sharing about what life was like after, I needed to be her. I went on this trip back to where I did my graduate studies and met with every spiritual healer and mentor to really figure out how I was supposed to share this story and how I was supposed to help people in this capacity. And everything that I did, every person I met with, all roads led to, you need to write about it. So that was in May of 2018. I went, and that was the anniversary week that I had been assaulted too. So for the past, I don't know how many years, I've decided to make the month of May, like there's something positive that I do in that month instead of it being a month that I absolutely hate. And so for me, that trip going back to meet with healers and meet with mentors and to really figure out how I was supposed to move forward with this was extremely healing and also nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I came back on the plane like, oh my gosh, I have to do this thing. I have to write a book. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to write a book? And so
absolutely.
Yeah.
So did you come home and just start it? Or what did that journey look like? Because I think it's important for people to hear that part of the process too.
Right. No. So I came home. I've always been a writer. I've always loved writing, but I had no idea how to write a book. And on Facebook one day I saw this ad and it said, do you want to write a book that makes a difference? I was like, what?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do. Right. How did this happen? So I clicked on the link and I filled out my application, and I actually deleted my whole application after I filled it out because I said, nobody's going to want to hear my story. nobody talks about this. Like, I was told not to talk about it. So I was only allowed to share it with attorneys and my counselor. I was told this is something you
Who
don't.
told you?
I had a family member who
Okay.
I really respected, and that was their advice, that people would make fun of me, that this would be a disappointment to the family. And so I ended up, because of the person who did it to me was a serial predator, and they couldn't find him right after it happened. So I had to move and relocate. And as I relocated, I had to pretend like nothing was going on. And so for me to then go and fill out this application about writing a book that makes a difference and supporting sexual assault survivors, I'm like, well, nobody wants to hear this. Nobody will care. Deleted the application. And then a few weeks go by, and I had a rough day at work, and I was like, I just feel like I'm called to be doing something different, and I need to fill out that application. And sure enough, I filled it out, and with a matter of, I don't even think it was weeks, I had the recruiter reaching out to me and saying, like, can we set up a time to meet? I want to talk about your book idea. So
Amazing.
right, to go from thinking that nobody wants to hear your story, this is something that you don't talk about, to having this big company reach out and say, no, we believe in you, like, we want to hear your story. That was a huge pivotal point in my life and in my journey.
What did that feel like? Like, I know that is an amazing and exciting thing, but there must have been a bunch of stuff that boiled up then at that point that was like, oh, now I'm really going to tell the story.
Right? Yeah. So at first there was a lot of excitement, but also that wanting to still hide, that wanting to put on my mask. Do I want people to know this? And if I'm going to own this and be her, am I going to be completely transparent? Am I going to talk about the victim blaming and who victim blamed me? Am I going to talk about sexual experiences and what that was like after?
Mm-hmm.
How transparent and vulnerable am I going to be? And I decided, to the best of my ability, it all had to come out, because I wasn't doing anybody any service to hide or mask what was going on.
Sugar-coated.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, my bunny, if you can hear him, he just decided to drink. So it's really loud. Okay.
Barely hear him. Like, I heard a shuffle and that was it. And I forgot about your amazing bunny.
I know. He's been my book writing buddy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to go back to the family member that
Mm-hmm.
spoke to you about not sharing. Do you think that family member was trying to save you from pain? Was that the thought process, do you think? Or what do you think?
I see it that way now. I
Yeah,
really think, in a sense, though, the saying hurt people, and whether you resonate with that or not,
I do.
this individual was definitely hurting and reliving some of their own trauma through my experience. And I was treated the way that they were treated. And that's how they knew to handle the situation. And so it took me a long time and a lot of growth on my end to figure that out and be able to have a healthy relationship with that person again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say, in
That's
some
huge.
ways, yeah. And in some ways, it really did serve me well, because I got to live somewhat of a life that was normal. Um, or I don't know what normal is, but I still went to school. I volunteered at the Children's Hospital. I worked at Applebee's, and I had 3.5 years of a rape trial on the other side of my life. But I had some normalcy, which was nice for me. I didn't feel like I was that person that was going through a rape trial. I felt like I was a college student doing my thing. So
That's
there was.
true. I've never looked at it that way for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very similar situation in that I was very much a sweeper of the feelings, and you just carry on with the mask and everything's fine and everything's good. So I can appreciate that side of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there were moments that I guess were some positive from that, because I've always looked back at mine as like, why did you do that? I don't live with regret. I know everybody's journey is their journey, and that was meant to be my journey,
Yeah.
but I don't recommend it for anybody. But I guess there were some slivers of positivity that were able to come through that.
I think something that was really life-changing for me was learning that idea of Everything that we're doing is serving a purpose. And how do we view that with love? And so if I look at myself and see the masks that I wore and the hiding my story, my goodness, I was protecting my heart. I was protecting myself. And that's how I knew how to love myself in that space. And that's a beautiful thing. And it might not be ideal for everybody, but learning to come to that place for me was huge.
Yeah. I think that is huge for people to know that we are just doing the best that we can in any moment.
Yeah.
And then to not shame ourselves for anything that we've done wrong, either way, anyway. When it comes to, I want to speak to this because as much as our stories are very different, there was a suicide in my immediate family, and then people didn't know how to talk to me. And I'm wondering if it was similar for you when you came out, when you were open with everything, of how people talk to you or didn't talk to you. Because I think people sometimes can then not say something because they're worried that they're going to say the wrong thing, or they say the very wrong thing and then they try to backpedal. But how did that present itself with you? Were there people that said things that were inappropriate? Were there people that just didn't say anything at all and pretended it wasn't there? And how did that feel on your side?
Yeah, so I really started noticing after I'll use the words came out. So for me, most people, I would say 85% of people in my life had no idea that this happened, even close family members. And the way that I chose to just step out and let it out, because I mean, I was writing a book about it, people were going to find out, right?
Yes.
I wrote a Facebook post, well, a social media post.
Yeah.
And my little sister, who's the only one that ever went to court with me, my friend Julie did show up for part of one too. So I shouldn't say the only one. Julie was there as well. She went with me to a coffee shop and I was shaking to let this out because I mean, my whole identity, I mean, I thought that this could ruin me. I thought that, you know, I'd worked so hard to build my career and here I am letting this out for the world to see. And this is something we don't talk about. Like I could be ruined. All of my vulnerable pieces just hanging out there. So I'm sitting there shaking and my sister knocks my hand off and hits submit. And in that moment, I had to walk away. I didn't want to know what was happening. And I was flooded with messages of, thank you, I love you, I'm sorry, I didn't know, I would have been there. And I still that day, it makes me teary eyed because to go from feeling like you're hiding such a huge piece of who you are and such a huge part of what's gone on in your life to just having the ability to be
Here's
you.
my whole bare vulnerable.
Right? Here I am. It was the most beautiful experience. And as I started sharing more and speaking and writing more, I did start to find that people didn't know how to have conversations with me about this. We don't talk about it. And something that I also speak to is that not only do we not talk about it, we don't have the language to articulate our thoughts and feelings on it. There's so many feelings that I have that I don't know how to explain them to somebody. And so what I do anytime I open up to speak with somebody, anytime I go and speak with an organization, is I always give them 3 rules. And one of them is, however I show up is perfectly okay. Because sometimes this is extremely hard to talk about. I might cry, I might laugh, I might be totally okay. However I show up is okay. And I make them agree. Thumbs up. Yes, however Melissa shows up, that's how she's supposed to be today. Because there's nothing wrong with any way that I show up. The other thing that I say is that I am responsible for me. They might feel awkward asking questions. They might not know how to ask the right question. And they might be terrified to even ask a question. And I let them know that you ask me anything. There is nothing that we can't talk about. And if I feel uncomfortable asking a question, let me be responsible for that. And I will let you know that I don't want to talk about it. And by doing that, it invites this space for people to feel like they can just be themselves. Because not only is it however I show up is okay, it's however you show up is okay too. So that is another thing.
That's like powerful on so many levels in any situation or scenario.
Right? It gives people the freedom to be whoever and however they need to be in that moment. And it makes the conversation more intimate. It makes it more authentic. And there's no expectations. Or if I was supposed to go in stone face and talk about being raped, there's no way. But yet, if I'm given that freedom to be who I need to be in that moment, it makes the conversation so much better.
That's really cool. That is very powerful to look at it that way and come at it that way. When what would you say to somebody that is an outsider? So, like, this hasn't happened to me. How can I best support someone that has been through this?
Yeah, I think it starts with that piece of letting them be whoever and however they need to be. Healing and grieving after sexual assault can look very different for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's something to be said for listening, but not just listening, expecting them to speak, but just listening and being there with somebody. There's a big difference in wanting me to just talk and talk and talk about how I'm feeling versus just sitting there and being with me and being in that space. Because like I said before, the words are not always easily articulated. Sometimes we don't even have the words. And so knowing that whoever this person is that you're with, just being with them is absolutely the best thing that you can do.
I can't believe how much of this didn't think this would relate to me in any capacity in that way, but it is so similar of like that's what I needed. It is I think it's a healing and grieving process for lots of different situations, I guess, in
Yeah.
that I didn't have the words. And I can imagine on the that side of sexual assault, you don't have the words, and it will probably be a tornado of feelings at different times, a hurricane of all sorts of feelings that just come through.
Right. Something that I speak on a lot is that our bodies, the book is a holistic approach. So body, mind, spirit, and looking at ourselves wholly. And sexual trauma is such a physical trauma. And our bodies cry out in so many different ways. And allowing your body to cry out and be however it needs to be is also huge. And accepting that piece. For me, when I don't know what my body is saying, I turn to visual journaling. I am not an artist by any means, but when I can't figure out what's going on, I will turn to scribbling in my visual journal to help process and get some of that out. And that for
Can
me
you
is a way to
talk about
communicate.
visual journaling for a second for people that aren't familiar at all
Ah,
with it?
so in one way that I use visual journaling, something for me that I know, I'm a really animated person, right? My arms, when I talk, I don't know how to keep my arms down. Right? But when I am triggered or when I'm feeling off, my arms do not move. When I'm dancing, I know that something is wrong because I love to dance. And if my arms do not want to participate, I know that something's off. And so when I visual journal, I work in polarities. And so looking at, okay, my arms, like they don't want to participate. They're at my sides. They're sad. What does that feel like? I'm going to go and color about it. Whatever color, whatever comes out is what comes out. And then I'm going to, which don't make yourself if your body doesn't want to, but I will make myself sometimes then move my arms. And what does that feel like? And what comes out? Sometimes words will come out. Sometimes it's images. Sometimes it's colors. But visual journaling gives you another way to communicate with yourself without having that pressure of verbalizing what's happening. So
I
it
love
gives you an
that.
outlet that's creative.
I have never called it that or articulated it that way, but I do recommend with clients all the time, and this is something that has worked for me of when we're first getting into journaling, we don't have words, and still sometimes I don't have words. I don't know exactly it, but I know something's off, and so
Right.
it is just scribbles. But I
Mm-hmm.
like the idea of the color piece too, because I think that is
Right. And
important.
bringing in that movement, because our bodies are so full of knowledge, and that movement piece, especially for people who are kinesthetic processors, getting in there and moving and working with polarities can help move and bring some healing into your body.
Yeah. Okay, now I can't remember what we were talking about visual journaling. Just in maybe their beginning.
I think we were talking about the ways in which sometimes you don't have the words, and having somebody be with you
Right.
and accepting that you don't have the words. And I think that I should also state the obvious, that if somebody comes to you and says this has happened, believe them, right? I feel like that's an obvious thing to say. Believe them, don't blame them, and be with them.
I had a situation actually when I was in my early 20s that a gentleman had came to my house, and it was the first time that I ever, it was a family friend, and so I felt completely comfortable with him driving me home at the end of the night, and no
Mhm.
big deal. And he had came in the house, and it was the first time that I'd ever realized that I was kind of feisty for my young self, and I felt very like I had moved across the country by myself at that point. I lived on my own. I was, like I just
Yeah.
felt like I had it all. And it was the very first time that nothing happened, but he wouldn't leave. And I
Mhm.
realized that I could not make him leave
Yeah.
physically. And that scared the crap out of me. Of
Mhm.
like, if he decided there is nothing I can do right now, like I was a little bit frozen in fear for a little bit of like what that looked like and what that could have meant. And luckily it didn't turn into anything absolutely horrific. But I did share with family members afterwards, and it was very much like, don't make a big deal. Their family's very wealthy.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about this because that family is quite wealthy. And I felt so separated, and nothing had actually happened to me.
Right.
So I can't even imagine what that would feel like if
Mm-hmm.
something had happened and then there was questioning on the other side. So I think it is important to say, of if they're brave enough to come out and say something, how can we diminish them that way?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we should. And I think too, like there's a questioning, right? Like sometimes happens, well, what were you doing? What were you wearing? Were you drinking? We had this
We were
conversation.
just talking about this.
Don't ask those things. It doesn't matter. It happened. They said it happened, and be with them.
And it truly doesn't matter for
No.
anybody that is listening in any capacity. It doesn't matter what you were wearing or what was drunk or any of those things at all. It still doesn't make it okay in any capacity. What did it feel like? How long of a process was it before he was caught?
So my story is I wasn't the only one.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened after, I didn't report it right away, because I was still, I think I was in denial. I didn't want to admit that this happened. And the next day, I had sent him an email saying that I was 50% to blame because I let him into my bed. So, what had happened, just to give a little bit of background, is I was really sick. I had a really bad cold. And he came to my house to make me chicken noodle soup. He brought me flowers, brought his guitar, and it was just this beautiful thing. Like, here I am sick, and this big, handsome guy's coming in to take care of me. There is no evidence of it, but I would suspect that something was put in my soup, because I ate some soup and basically my head just went into my hands. I will never forget that feeling. And I chose to go to bed, and I left this guy in my living room. In the middle of the night, I woke up and he was out on my computer on my futon. And I was like, well, this is weird. Why don't you come to bed? So he came to bed, and that's when he chose to rape me. From that, the next day, because I invited him into my bed, like the easiest thing to do is blame yourself, right? Nobody else is to blame but me. I invited this guy in. Um, and so I sent the email. Well, then a few days went by. All of my friends had met this guy. I wanted to make sure that I was safe before I ever hung out with him alone,
Mm-hmm.
and did all of the good girl things, right? That we talked about. And after it happened, one of my friends saw him on the college campus or the university campus, peering through his sunglasses on his bicycle, like looking around the campus. And she called me and she said, whatever you do, do not walk home. Do not walk home. I will come and get you. And so that is when I knew I had to report. It had been at most a week. I don't like know the exact time frame. That was so long ago.
Yeah.
When I called to report, they took my statement. The police officer, unlike many people, I had a very kind police officer who
Good.
showed up, which was great. And I would say the next day or so, I chose to go home to tell my family. And on my way there, I got a call from a detective asking if I could come down to the station. I think the station's the right word. That sounds so like in the movies, but this felt like in the movies.
Yep.
So because I was on my way out of town, I couldn't come until the beginning of the next week. And so I went home and I didn't tell my family. I was so worried that they would blame me and tell me it was my fault. And I already was blaming myself and telling me that it was my fault. I spent the whole weekend with them and I didn't say a word. And I came back to where I was going to university and I went down and met with the detectives and looked at this stream, like a bunch of different mugshots. And sure enough, there was his mugshot. And so it was a younger version of him, but it was definitely him. And so he had, prior to doing it to me, had done it to a minor in California. He was not supposed to be in Washington State. He was on parole down there. Mm-hmm. Everything that he told me, except for his name, was a lie. His age, his occupation, everything. And they couldn't find him right after it happened to me. So I had to relocate for my safety. So after I relocated, I had to drive back every 2 weeks to get a temporary restraining order until they found him. And then I don't remember if it was, so it happened to me in May. I don't know if it was the end of June or beginning of, it was June or July. They called me and said, well, we have good news and we have bad news. I was like, okay, like lay it on me. We have good news, we found him. We have bad news, we found him because he did it to somebody else. And so, of course, like I immediately took the blame for it happening.
I was going to say, did you just go into guilt?
Yeah, because I didn't report it soon enough. And so I thought that I was to blame for that.
And just so we're clear, we both don't believe that.
No, God, no. It was not my fault. Yeah. It was not my fault. But that's immediately how I felt. Like this happened to me. I know how horrible it is, and I let it happen to somebody else. So what happened is they chose not to pursue my case. I reported it too late. I had an email saying that I was 50% to blame. And so they asked me to be a character witness in the other woman's trial. So that's how I ended up spending 3.5 years dealing with the legal system. It was crazy. It turned out it went to a full-blown trial. So I had to testify in front of a jury. After the full-blown trial, he was sentenced 12 years to life. And then, and I don't understand the whole legal process. That's part of my trauma that I blocked out. The legal process for me was by far the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Well, 3.5 years of just never being able to fully close that chapter even.
Right. Yeah. So he was originally sentenced though, and then his church and his family paid for an attorney to appeal it, and he got off on the appeal. And so we were supposed to go to trial again, and it turned out that he reached a plea bargain. So he got a way lesser sentence. And I have looked him up. I try not to, but sometimes, especially when the book was coming out, I was really scared for my safety. Because he knows who I am. He had a picture of me. At the end of the 3.5 years, he somehow held up a picture in front of the judge of me. Crazy that he had held on to it that long, and he had been in jail and in prison. So I don't know where he was keeping this picture of me. So where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought.
Talking about like the 3.5 years, the book coming out, looking him up.
Correct. Yes. And so I really started to go down the rabbit hole of, am I safe to do this? He knows my name. He knows, I mean, my guess is he probably stalks my social media, even though I don't know. But then I just have to trust, like I'm doing this for a bigger purpose, and I will be taken care of. And this is to support others. I don't name him. Sometimes people get really upset with me that I don't name him in interviews. And I don't name him for my own protection. It's not to protect him, it's to protect myself. And he doesn't deserve a name in my interviews or in my book. Like,
I don't think so either.
yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of giving him power,
right,
I
right,
feel like, in doing that. And this isn't about him.
right. Yeah, this is to support people and healing and moving on with their life.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
I'm so grateful that you do.
yeah.
We were discussing how before we hopped on here of the feeling of being alone. And I think we talked about me too on the interview too, actually. But that is one of, I think, the most important pieces for us is to not feel alone in our situations. And for my own self in my situation, I didn't feel like anybody knew what I had been through at all. And I still feel like, to a degree, and I'm sure you go through this because your situation has its own differences from everybody else's too.
Mhm.
And social media wasn't a thing, support groups, like it wasn't online at that time. And so just being able to, if I had had a book, if I had had somebody on social media that could say this happened to me too in this type of way, that
Mhm.
would have really helped me in my journey. To
Right.
not feel like I was the only one on the, sometimes I felt like I was the only one on the planet. I don't know if you went through that, but it was like there's a
Mhm.
lot of people out there and I don't feel like anybody knows what this is like.
Right. And what a sad world that we live in when we are all experiencing these horrific things, and yet we're taught to just put on that face, put on that mask, don't talk about it, we don't tell anybody. We can't even say that we felt unsafe when nothing technically happened. But at the same time, that's still traumatizing to
Yes,
feel unsafe and not be able to protect yourself, and yet you still can't freaking talk about it.
exactly. Exactly. Was there a time through that trial, because I did have to go to the police station as well and make a statement, and I just remember pulling in to the parking lot and being like, I can't believe this is my life. And then I went into the room and it was literally like on TV where they had like the little recording device on the table and there's no windows. And I was just like, it was a pukey green color.
Mhm.
And it was just like, this is so surreal. I can't believe that this is happening. And so I can't imagine what 3.5 years of that felt like.
So they actually, when they had asked me to testify, at first I was like 100%, like I have to do this for her. Like I don't care about me, I have to do this for her. But I was so alone. I had no family going with me. My friends didn't know, and the friends that did know, no offense to them, but we were young and dumb. They
Yeah.
didn't know how to support me.
Yeah.
And so I felt so alone that I actually called the attorneys and I said, I can't do this. I'm sorry. I can't. Like, it's making me sick.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, they chose to subpoena me. So I had to. But there was a point where I couldn't do it anymore. I would go to school and I wouldn't sleep at night. And so I would go to school, and then in between my classes, I'd go find somewhere safe on campus to sleep so that I felt safe sleeping, knowing that other people were around. I would sleep in my car in between classes when it wasn't cold outside because I felt safer sleeping in my car than in my own bed. It was terrible. But when they flew out here to do my deposition,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the prosecuting attorney, the defense attorney. They had what was her, I don't know what her role was. She was nice, but her support was not necessarily the best support for me.
Mm-hmm.
And my counselor came with me to do the deposition because I had nobody to go with me. And we were in that little room. They had the little, what is that? Is it a stenographer?
Yeah.
They're on the little thing.
Yeah.
Um, the defense attorney was so brutal to me. Like, it makes me cry still. I ran out of the room and people were coming out of their offices to make sure that I was alive. Like, I was hyperventilating. Both the prosecuting attorney and my counselor said that they've never seen a defense attorney treat a victim that way. It was the worst they had ever seen. And so my counselor actually wrote a letter to his boss, and I don't know what came of that, but when I went to testify, the defense attorney got up there to question me, and I just basically crumbled, like hyperventilating in the witness stand, couldn't even look at this guy. I mean, he was horrible to me. And I point over here actually because the courthouse is right there. You can see it out my window, which sounds weird. I keep pointing to it like you can see.
I didn't even notice, but you did.
Yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, it's right there. I was right there. But so the judge was like, well, like I think it's called a recess. They basically made everything stop and let me go into a room and catch my breath and come together. And you know what? The defense attorney was not even awful to me. So I don't know what happened in that little room, but the questions that he asked me up there, he was way kinder. Still terrible questions, still told the jury. His last thing that he said to the jury was Miss McDaniel laid on her back to receive him. Right. So still awful, but compared to what I experienced in that little room with the stenographer and having to run out and fall on the bathroom floor, like way better. So it was horrific.
There's just no other word for it. That is horrific to have to continually go through,
Right.
essentially, for that amount of time. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not getting into politics or the systems or anything. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all that
Yeah.
that
I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the day that I get brave enough to look him up and send him my book. And I'm almost there. I'm almost there. But I think the part that
all sorts of good feels inside. That will be a very cool day for you.
Right. I hope he gets it. Like I don't know. And I there's no way he could forget who I am. I mean, he treated me like garbage. So
isn't that, yeah, he will. It'll depend on his journey, I guess, of whether he accepts it and reads it or however that plays out. But
and then I'm like, wait, is he going to sue me because I said something wrong? I don't know how the legal system works. Bring it on.
Well, you didn't name him here. I don't know if you named him in.
I didn't name him here. I didn't name him in the book. I don't understand how the legal system works. So I probably got it wrong in my book. But, you know, you need to, I think that they're in it because it's a profession and they forget that we are people with lives, and his goal is to win and keep his client out of prison. And here I am trying to get his client into prison, which I don't know how you even defend somebody like that, but that's a different.
I don't know either. I actually worked for a law firm for 2 years, and the lawyer that I worked for, I loved him, but he had left family law, and so he had just a little bit kind of lingering. He was getting completely out of family law because it was too stressful. And some of the things that would come across my desk, I was like, I don't know how people do this for their whole lives.
Yeah.
Every day of, yeah.
I don't know either.
I am grateful in many ways because there are things happening. There are lawyers out there that need to be able to handle these sorts of things. I guess the prosecutors is more what I'm looking at on this end of it, but yeah, it's not a job that I want to be a part of by any means. Yeah. So how can people find your book? We're going to put links in the comments so that it's easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is available at Barnes & Noble. It's available on Amazon. Most bookstores can actually get it in the US and Canada right now. So it's not international yet. I believe that the ebook is international right now.
So exciting.
Yes. And they can also come check me out on social media. My handle's super easy. It's just at melissa.ann.mcdaniel. So just look up Melissa Ann McDaniel. You should find me. And you can also purchase copies through me.
Perfect. I love it so much. And I'm so grateful for you sharing your story, living through it. I'm sure even as we were talking about the legal system, writing the book would have been reliving it again for yourself. But did you find it a little bit healing in some capacities?
Absolutely. I feel like because I wrote it in 9 weeks with a coach, I think that was easier than sitting and spending 3 years trying to write this out and just sitting in it. I also think like now I get to live in my truth. I don't have to be anybody but me. right now. I just get to show up and be me every day. If I'm feeling off because something has triggered me, it's all right. I'm me, and people know. I can just say, hey, I'm not feeling all right today. This is why.
Yeah.
So I feel like there has been a lot of healing and a lot of growth. But there were some times where I'm writing and wondering, what in the world did I decide to do?
Right? Okay, can you just touch on, before we let you go, actually what it felt like or has felt like, or the first time or something that stands out of when somebody let you know that you had impacted them?
I think it still like doesn't like I don't even know how to describe it. It's such a feeling that is you've got me speechless here. It makes me speechless. I think that I don't realize the impact that this could have on people. And I get messages from people all around the world. I think one of the messages that touched me the most, I got from a high school student whose mom had found my book. And this was before it had even been published. And she wrote me and just talked about the impact that it had on her to see somebody else who has gone through this and to know that she's going to be okay. And she said that just reading the introduction of my book, that's as far as she got. And she said, just reading that made me feel less alone and like everything was going to be okay. It gives me goosebumps.
It's so cool. It makes it worth being vulnerable for or share.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I also like there's this fine line that I have to try to remember. Like I'm not that I'm not helping people, but they're helping themselves by picking up the book and starting to read.
Exactly.
And I think that that's something that, yes, I have written the book and it's a tool for others to use, but it doesn't do the work if that person doesn't choose to pick it up. And so in that choice, like people that are listening, if you have gone through this and you choose to pick up the book, like that's huge on you and huge in your healing process, because that's all you, that's not me. The words are me, but you choosing to take that step and pick up the book is all you.
I think that's super powerful as well. It makes me think of, I had some injuries to do with religion from my past, and for quite a while I was a little bit bitter in that we would put all of the power in the book, in the Bible, and we would forget about the people. And so I love that you said that. That's what it makes me think of like, yes, you were so brave and courageous to put this book out here and to offer the help, but it is just as much about them getting into the book and them doing their own healing journey process, period. And everybody's journey and process is different in every situation, I think. And I'm just super proud of you for following through on that, even though that probably felt very uncomfortable and vulnerable at many moments throughout that process. Yes.
I think it's gone from being something in my life that was so secret and hidden to now it's like, well, what do you do? What's your profession? That's the question that most people ask when you meet them. And so constantly, well, I'm an author. Well, what did you write about? Oh, well, let me tell you what I wrote about. So it's every day living in owning that I wrote this book and owning that this happened to me and that I am moving forward in this path to support others on their healing journey. But
and you feel more and more powerful within yourself the more you tell that story, and the less, I'm going to say, emotionally detached we get from it. I can only relate it to like my suicide journey of the more times I share my story of trying to commit suicide or talk about it in any capacity, the less emotional I get about it. And it's not because it doesn't mean anything to me, but I don't know, there's a healing process that has happened for me within sharing that story multiple times.
Yeah, I think the more that we release it, the more we have room for love in us, right? And so the more that you're speaking it, the more that you're letting it out there, the more that you are sharing it with others, the more love that we start to fill with. And I think in sharing it with others, you're kind of taking that weight off of your own shoulders, right? It's kind of that analogy of when you're carrying something all alone. So you've got two big old bricks here and you're carrying them alone, how heavy that is. And when you give a brick to somebody else and let them carry it with you, it takes part of that weight off of you. So I think it's similar to
Beautiful analogy.
my little bricks.
Yeah, I like
I think the
it.
analogy uses something else, but that is what the image that came to mind, is that something that's easy to give to somebody else and hand off was the brick.
It is. Many hands make light work, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it totally fits. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing with us. Make sure you guys check out the links below with in the comment section with links to her book and her website and her upcoming newsletter that will be coming soon.
Yes. Hmm.